since time immemorial. When governments are hard up for funds and they're up to here and that, they're going to come after your earnings and also your wealth.
What I said is tax advice. I'm not a qualified
Yeah.
tax advisor. I'm just telling you what I see other
Yeah,
people doing, and I think other people should ask their accountants or tax advisor.
I agree with that too. I'm not a tax advisor. I'm not an investment advisor either. We're just giving you our opinion. And yeah, consult with an accountant or a solicitor. Friday, June 14th, 2024, Monaco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. Good morning, Clive. How are you?
Good morning, Mario. Well, rainy day here in Switzerland. What are we going to talk about today?
Well, today we're going to talk about elections and in particular the UK, as I'm based in the UK and I've seen some of the viewers' questions on the comment section about what should we do in the run up to the election and after the election in terms of taxation. And I think this applies to every country in the West because at the end of the day, uh, the only thing politicians, especially in the since the end of the Second World War and even the First World War, we've seen government spending always go up. I'm just going to show Clive before we delve deeper into what you know about the taxation situation for the UK, something you've looked at for decades. Just wanted to show the viewers, and I'm going to scroll up for a second. So this is a list of countries by government spending as a percentage of GDP. And what's really interesting is down here at the bottom. This is a historical development of government spending as a percentage of GDP. And I'm going to go down here to the United Kingdom and the United States. And you can see that up until, let's say, World War I, here in the UK, government barely spent more than 10% of GDP. So the government or the state was a lot leaner. I think people, yeah, and I think that's why the economy flourished, the Industrial Revolution. But then after World War I, it kind of was just one way up. And now we're at 50% of GDP, or just above 50% of GDP in government spending. The US, uh, it was even less. The federal government was even less involved. And it was only after really World War I that it picked up. And it's almost catching up with the UK. So, Clive, um, and I want to tell the viewers that we're not siding with Labor, Conservatives, or Reform Party, which apparently is in one of the polls now leading the Conservatives. I don't think they really matter who was in power. They're going to come after your hard-earned savings, your earnings. They're going to tax you for consuming. They're going to tax your children out of private schools. So, Clive, what can you, with your decades plus of experience in helping people, fight, navigate through this, what can you tell us?
Sure. Well, first of all, as you talked about the spending, the national debt of the UK is now 31 trillion, and that's at 100. There's 100% of GDP. It's past 100% of GDP, so it's not going to get any better. And they've got a very large spending deficit of 1.2 trillion a year. So that debt is just going to keep climbing, and of course it becomes problematical because interest rates in the UK are much higher, so they're having to refinance the maturing debt at ever higher rates, as well as finance the new debt at higher interest rates. So interest rates are going to bite into the government spending more and more as the years go by. And I think the real problem is it doesn't really matter which party wins this election, although I think it's pretty clear from the latest YouGov poll that the Labour Party will have a landslide win after 13 years of Conservatives being in power. but it doesn't matter who wins, because whoever wins will have to deal with the fact that spending is much, much higher than the income being collected. And so what are they going to do about it? Are they going to cut spending, or are they going to increase taxes, or are they going to do nothing at all, which would basically mean print it away? And I think it's probably a mixture of all of those. So perhaps we can just run through what people should be thinking about, and what sort of people, because of course we've got people who've got very little, and we've got people who've got an awful lot in the UK.
Yeah.
And perhaps
Can I just correct something? I think the national debt is 3.1 trillion. You said 31 trillion.
Oh yeah, I'm probably looking at the wrong decimal place on my screen there.
Yeah, there's so many zeros.
Yes, you're right. You're right. Of course, it can't be as high as the it's the United States, which is at 30 something trillion.
We'd be Zimbabwe.
Yes,
But it
yes,
could get there. Who knows?
you're right.
But
So if we just have a quick run through some of the taxes, let's start with the obvious one, VAT. And of course, Mario, you've spoken many times on your show about VAT on coins. Do you want to refresh our memory about which coins in the UK have got VAT and which ones do not?
yeah, basically silver. So any silver that you buy, coins or bars, they have VAT 20%. So on top of the spot price and a bit of a premium that the dealer will charge you, he will charge you VAT. There are ways of buying without VAT. Some shops sell secondhand, what they call secondhand silver coins without VAT, but a lot of times it's just embedded in the price. And I would tell viewers that you should not worry about the VAT, because I started buying silver in 2003 and it was under £4 an ounce, and I ended up paying VAT, but I don't care about the VAT 20 years later, and because I think silver will continue to do well. The other thing about coins of the realm, and we've got King Charles III here, is that let's say you buy 1,000 of these and silver triples in price, and then you sell it. There's no capital gains tax either. Of course, governments can change that, but as of now, there isn't. And what about gold? Well, there's no VAT on gold since 1999 on any gold, really. But this is a Britannia, which is, again, capital gains tax free. You've got sovereigns, they're capital gains tax free and VAT free, and half sovereigns. Any coin that is a coin of the realm is capital gains tax free. So I think that's important. I'm not saying people should put all their savings or investments in gold, but if you want to negate the capital gains tax situation, which is very uncertain, you might want to think about gold and silver, but coins of the realm. And the reason VAT was abolished for gold was because the gold price is a lot higher than silver, and a lot of the dealers were claiming VAT from the taxman from gold that they bought in VAT-free jurisdictions. So the taxman was losing loads of money, so they just scrapped the VAT. That's the only reason why. And just wanted to let the viewers know as well, if they're interested in protecting some of their savings from capital gains tax and inflation, check out the description of this video. I'm affiliated with Gold Investments in the City of London. That's where I started buying gold and silver over 20 years ago, and it's a family-run business, and they always have specials for the viewers, so it's below in the description. So that's the situation, Clive. VAT just on silver, which is 20%. I think the first time I bought silver, VAT was 17.5%. I don't think they're going to change the rate.
So in my career, I remember VAT used to be 8%, then it was 12%, then it was 15%, now it's 20%. There is a possibility they'll put it up yet again. Who knows what, to 22%, 25%. So I suppose what I'm saying is, if you're thinking of buying something, you want to think about buying it earlier. Let's say you're going to buy an exercise machine or whatever, or you're going to employ some workmen to do an improvement in your house, and you want to pay the lower VAT rate. Well, get that done or buy it before they change the tax rate. That's a possibility. I think the another thing to note about VAT is that private education at the moment in the UK is VAT free. And there's been some discussion about them putting VAT on school fees. And now this will affect a lot of people have got this image that it's boys going to Eton wearing top hats, but it's going to affect a much larger group of people than that. There's countless middle class people who send their children to private school for whatever reason. But if they put VAT onto school fees, that will make it harder for people to pay those fees. It could make quite a substantial difference. Now, there may be ways, and I don't know if this would work. I think even the government has said it won't work, but there may be ways to prepay your school fees. But perhaps not. Let's not talk about the wealthier. Let's talk about the poorer and how VAT on school fees might affect them. One of the things that private schools do is they have bursaries. Bursaries are where they provide financial support to qualifying children to attend the private school. And there could be all sorts of reasons why they give out a bursary. It might be political, it might be diversity, it might be because they qualify from an education or sports thing. So if you have a child who might qualify for a bursary, perhaps it's in a school in your area or you want to send them to a boarding school, and you might qualify for a bursary because you can't afford it, well, you want to be applying early because if they do impose VAT on private education, it means that there'll be less parents who can afford to send their kids to school. Therefore, the income of private schools will go down, and therefore they'll have less money to provide bursaries. So the number of bursaries, the number of people getting education free of charge or at a supported level from private schools will go down. So my first comment is, if you're going to thinking of a kind of a bursary, apply now, because the number of places could well go down if they implement their proposal to tax school fees.
Uh,
Yeah,
Sorry,
go on.
I was reading the article you sent me there that I just showed in the Telegraph, and apparently there are a lot of people who are trying to pay it now for the September term, but the politicians they're so money hungry, and that's the best thing they do, take your money. That they're already saying that it's going to be backdated. So if they get elected, Labor, and you already paid your September fees VAT free, they're going to come after you. So they're really determined to stop that.
Well, they might. If it was me, I would take my chance. The worst that could happen is you're in the same position as everybody else. The best that could happen is you got in ahead of the crowd, don't have to pay the VAT. But you're right. They have, I suppose, to stop people prepaying, they have actually said that that won't work. But we'll see. Um, let's move on to another tax which might be affected in the UK, which is stamp duty, in particular stamp duty on house purchases and who qualifies. Uh, it's not going to go, I don't think it's going to get any cheaper, maybe for first-time buyers or something like that. But if you're a person who is thinking of changing home, again, it's something to think about as to your timing. I think you're going to get a better deal on stamp duty if you do it earlier than after they've raised the stamp duty. That is a possibility. By the way, I'd like to say none of these taxes that we're talking about are written in stone. Both sides, both the Conservatives and the Labour Party, are being very vague about what might change. So we don't have a vision on it, but we know something has to change because to balance the books a little bit.
Yeah, and what that does, the vagueness of it, and sometimes they do that because they don't want to give the other party ideas to steal their
Yeah.
ideas, but it creates uncertainty, so people don't know what to do.
Um, let's go on to capital gains tax. You talked, Mary, about the gold coins, which are capital gains tax free in the UK, and the silver coins, which are capital gains tax free. Obviously, you need to be looking at how those gains are going to be applied, and I think in particular on houses. They've got a different rate of capital gains tax on properties than on ordinary things. So I think on your UK capital gains tax, depending on your tax band, is either 10% or 20%. Those rates might go up, but I think there's a higher rate on capital gains on second properties. I think it's 18% for the lower level. I don't know what it is for the higher level. So again, it's if you've got something in property terms where you're thinking of selling it or buying it, but selling it really, where you're going to pay the capital gains tax, you perhaps want to think about the timing to get it in at the lower rates. Another thing on capital gains tax, you perhaps want to think about whether you should be spreading your assets around your family so that each person can benefit from the lower rate, so it doesn't all fall onto the highest rate taxpayer. That's an option. And last but not least, there used to be something in England called bed and breakfasting. Now, when I was young, that was where you would buy some shares. You have a shares with a large capital gain. You'd sell them at 5 o'clock in the evening one day, and you'd buy them back the next morning at 9 a.m. and you'd effectively pay the same price minus the stockbroker commission. They saw people were doing that to avoid their capital gains tax. So they brought in a rule, so you've got to have a 30-day gap between the buy and the sell. And then, of course, you're exposed to the market. It might go the wrong way for you. But in this day and age, the choice of what you can buy in the stock market is so huge, you don't actually have to buy the same thing. So you could actually, for example, if you've got a mining company share and you want to sell it, you could sell it, realize your gain now, pay the tax on the reduced gain, and then buy at the lower rate, of course, than what we might have. And then you could buy another company in the mining sector, starting afresh with a new higher base cost.
Yeah,
That's
I think, sorry, Clive, I think that's one thing they're going after is tax avoidance, which is not really illegal. Tax evasion is illegal, but tax avoidance is things like capital gains, maybe putting your money in a stock equity ISA. I think the limit right now is 20,000. So if you put 20,000 each tax year, and let's say your investments triple, you're not going to pay capital gains tax on that. So one thing I would say, if you're thinking for this tax year and you haven't yet put something in your ISA, I would do it before the election, even though, or before the result. Even though they could backtrack it, but I don't think they could. So yeah, if you haven't spent your 20,000, put your 20,000 yet in your investment ISA, I think you should do it now.
Let's talk a little bit about inheritance tax. A lot of people might inherit money from their grandparents or so forth. But many people don't actually realize how big your tax-free inheritance band can be. I think a lot of people would tell me that it's 325,000 or something like that.
Yeah, that's right.
But if you use the rules in the right way, you can push that to £1 million inheritance tax-free. I won't go into all the details of that, but that's taking into account the unused predeceased spouse's allowance, taking into account the property passing to your heirs, your children, your grandchildren allowance for both spouses. So even if one of the spouses died many, many years ago, a lot of people forget to claim this brand new allowance, which can push your, as I say, push your tax-free band as high as £1 million. But you may not qualify for that depending on your situation. But what can you do about inheritance tax? Well, first of all, grandparents should be thinking about whether they pass assets down the generations. If you pass it down one generation, then they die. That's another bunch of tax. It's another 40%. But pass it down two generations, you can save a generation's worth of capital of inheritance tax. So that's something that grandchildren can be, grandparents can be doing. They can also be funding their grandchildren's school fees in various ways. And I'll come back to a rather sophisticated way later. Um, but again, it's make the point here is if you want to reduce your estate for inheritance tax purposes, there's two things you need to do: spread it around and give it away.
Yeah.
But obviously, you don't want to give it away in such a way that you now go into your old age and can't, and there's no money left to look after you. So you're relying to a large extent on the beneficiaries of those gifts if you've given too much away to look after you.
The other thing I would say is if you are in a position or in a situation, unfortunately, where someone has died, you should really hire a good solicitor to help you with that because they deal with that every day and they know. And the other thing about gifting is that, yeah, they have a 7 year threshold, don't they? If you're I think if you pass it on um, something to
That's
your
right. So
children and you die before 7 years after you're done, you're going to be liable for capital gains tax. But there's also, Clive, it's really confusing. There's another one that if you give regularly, that doesn't count. Uh, maybe you could.
So yeah, what they call normal gifts out of income, and there's where the school fees might come in if if you've got enough income as a grandparent and you're regularly paying to your grandchildren the school fees. They're not gifts for inheritance tax because it's called normal expenditure out of income allowance. But otherwise, as you say, Mario, to be completely free of inheritance tax, the gift must have been made 7 years before you die and to get a partial allowance more than 2 years before you die. So there's no good saying, "Oh, my doctor's given me 3 months to live," and start giving it away because assuming that that gets reported and you are required to put on the inheritance tax forms, assuming it's reported, it'll just be added back again.
Yeah, yeah. So what else can we look at? Five.
Okay, so well, another one is the possibility of a wealth tax in the UK. Now, nobody knows, and it's not actually proposed by either party. But as I said, they're all being very quiet about what they're going to do. But were we to have a wealth tax, and we have a wealth tax here in Switzerland, it depends on how wealthy you are, but it can be anything from almost nothing, but nobody escapes it. Even the poor don't escape it, right through to about 1%. Uh, as a general rule, there's not much you can do to escape wealth tax other than, once again, sharing it out amongst your family. So if you have children or grandchildren, they might have a lower wealth tax rate because obviously this wealth tax, if it does come in, will be at a higher rate for the wealthy than it'll be for the less wealthy. But you need to be aware that that might come. And I wouldn't for a moment suggest that some of the things we've talked about might be a nice way to go under the table for that. But who knows?
Yeah, the other thing they're talking about is and it's a bit related to the wealth taxes going after people who own houses that are worth a lot more than the average house price, and
Yep.
they could increase the council tax. I've read about council taxes, for example, in Kensington and Chelsea, for example, where the average house price is probably over 1 million. You're paying 3, 5 million for, or even more for
You're
places.
probably talking about one-bedroom flats there, aren't
Yeah,
you, Mario?
but apparently the council tax for those are lower than, for example, in the suburbs. So I think they could go after those. I mean, it should be a decision for the local council, but the central government can always interfere and tell these people, yeah, you're gonna have to instead of I think it's like really low. They're paying like £100 a month. Someone with a 10 million pound house. Just to give an example, I pay over 200, but a month, and that could affect property prices a little bit in central
Could
London.
affect the more expensive properties. They
Yeah,
could
yeah,
be worth
yeah.
less if there's a higher tax on them.
But again, that's just speculation on my part. But they have spoken about that too.
Yep, they have indeed. The more expensive homes might well be paying a higher rate of tax or some other tax because of that. We talked a lot about the things you should do, but perhaps something you shouldn't do here. And we don't know what's going to happen to things like car tax, fuel tax, emissions, and so forth. I wouldn't change my car at the moment because I'd want to wait and see if anything is changing in the UK, because that might affect the type of car I buy, whether I'm going to buy a hybrid, electric, or gasoline or petrol car. I would say wait and see how the taxation on that develops before you change your car.
Yeah, or diesel. I saw someone on Twitter saying that Labor, if they win, which probably they will, they want to ban people buying uh, petrol and diesel cars by 2030. And I don't know if that includes hybrids, because my car, which unfortunately I had to get a new car in 2022 because of ULEZ, is a hybrid, but it's also petrol. So I'm not sure if hybrids are going to be also banned, but it's banned from buying. So if you still have the car, though, I think you can keep it. But again, uh, yeah, status, they always make life difficult. And like Clive said, just wait until to see what happens before you do it.
Another thing that people should be thinking about is the pensions that they have. I don't actually know all the rules, but I do know a lot of people have written to me over the years saying, should I withdraw my 25% tax-free? And obviously that is a rule which does exist for, I don't know if you've got to be a retired or a certain age, but anyway, a
Yeah,
lot of people can withdraw.
55 is the
Yeah.
ready.
So that's a nice allowance that people have got. There's a risk that that allowance might go away. So if you are going to withdraw it anyway, do it now while you can take advantage of the allowance, because it might not exist in a year's time.
That's right. And the other thing, and you don't even know, they could backtrack it too. So, and you don't have much time left. You've got about 3 weeks. The other thing they're going after, or there's a lot of talk about, is the amount in your private pension, the amount that you can have. I think the current government, they took out this limit of just over 1 million. Some people do have over 1 million saved over their lifetimes, and apparently there's a lot of speculation that Labor will want to put that limit of 1 million. So I think anything above that you'll be heavily taxed, and right now you're not. And I think yeah, there's a lot of worry vis-a-vis that.
One thing we haven't talked about yet is income tax. Um, Now, when I started work back in 1975, the Labour Party was in power, Harold Wilson, and we had an income tax rate at the time of 83% plus 15% investment income surcharge, which made it, for those who were living off investment income, 98% tax. And we had something in the UK, which we all knew the word back then. I don't know if people have heard it these days. It was called the brain drain. What that meant was the intelligent people who were wealthy, the wealthy, intelligent, or the high earners, were leaving the UK to go to America. Broadly speaking, it was America, because taxes in America were a lot lower than the UK, and people didn't want to pay 98% tax or 83% tax if they were just in a job. That was the top rate of tax, by the way. And that continued. We after Harold Wilson, we had James Callaghan. The Chancellor of the Exchequer at the time was Dennis Healy. Well, it was Dennis Healy. But when the Conservatives came in, they reduced that top rate of tax down to 60%. Well, where are we now? We're at 45% with a Conservative government. These high rates of taxes existed under a Labour government. I'm hoping that they're not going to go back to these high rates of tax, but I think the direction of travel is probably not downwards. In any case, even for the low earners, the Labour Party have said they're going to. I think both parties have said this. They're going to freeze the bands, which means that just through inflation, your tax rate is going to rise as you go into the higher band rates. So.
Sorry, Clive. Yeah, they've had this freeze on the thresholds or bands for quite a few years now, and it's going to run until 2027, 2028. And 45% top rate, I remember, well, that used to be 40, and it was the conservatives who raised it to 45. So,
Mhm.
and I'm not sure. I think there's still also a 40% band, but I wouldn't put it. Yeah, I wouldn't eliminate the possibility that Labor would bring in a 60% tax band for certain people earning over a certain amount. And the other thing, Clive, private equity executives, which is a minority of the population, but apparently they don't pay income tax. They have what they earn is considered, I think, dividend, and so they end up paying like only 28% tax. And Labor is thinking of changing that so that they pay the 45% top tax rate, which I think is fair, even though I don't think 45% is fair. But why should someone that's earning millions only pay 28%? Um, uh, and I think they would get over just 500 million a year from that. And I think that would just be political to show, oh, look, we're going after these people.
Well, while we're talking about private equity, let's just mention that there are some very significant tax breaks if you invest in private equity in the UK. Specifically, I think that you can get they're certainly free of inheritance tax, and I think they're also free of capital gains tax, if I'm not mistaken. That has to be checked. But there are quite attractive tax breaks if you invest in the right sort of private equity. And I think that may well include the AIM stock market in the UK. It certainly used to. I don't know if it still does.
Yeah, no, I think there is, and they might be coming after that as well, small companies, and yeah, and they say Labor, and I'm not like saying the conservatives have been any better, but they say that they want to create wealth and they want to get the economy growing again. I mean, that's the completely wrong way to go about it if you go after small businesses and tax them. um yeah, they lean more towards helping um the average worker, which fine if they want to do that, but in an ideal world it would be good, in my opinion, if government just try to stay out of the way and be as small as possible. As we saw back in Victorian times, government was about 10% of GDP in spending, but I don't see that changing, Clive.
I mean, you're right. I think there's not much you can do if you're an earner, if you can have a job from the income tax point of view. But if you're if you're living off income, let's say from bonds, uh, bear in mind that they are taxed if you're a top rate taxpayer, they're taxed at 45%, whereas capital gains is taxed at a top rate in the UK of 20%. So if the burden on income tax goes up, well, you might want to think whether you switch your strategy a little bit towards more capital gains tax or the tax-free types of investments we've talked about. That could be a possibility. Another one which they have said, the Labour Party have said they're definitely getting rid of, is the non-domicile regime. And I'll perhaps explain what that's all about for some people who may not realize. Ever since the beginning of time, non-domiciliaries could come to the UK and live tax-free provided or at least live tax-free on their non-UK income. So let's say you had an extremely wealthy Argentinian, he could leave his wealth behind in Argentina, come to the UK and not have to pay tax or declare his income or gains on that overseas wealth. Now, over the years, and certainly more recently in the last decade, they've started to rein in those rules and make non-domiciliaries pay more and more tax, although the regime does still exist, albeit that non-doms, I think they brought in an annual tax of minimum £90,000. A lot of non-doms, when they first brought this tax in some years ago, over the next decade, did leave the UK. In 2007, according to the government's own figures, I'm just looking here, there were 60,000 non-doms in the UK paying, it was 120,000 in 2007, paying, and there's now only 60,000, half of them have gone. And they say today they're paying an average of £167,000 per non-dom. So non-dom is somebody who's born overseas, come to live in England for a temporary period. So £167,000 they're paying, and the number's halved because of the extra taxes they put on the non-doms. The average UK person, according to the UK statistics, is paying about £7,000 in tax in comparison. So what the government is proposing to do, the Labour Party, is to completely get rid of the non-dom regime. And that can only result in some more of those non-doms saying, that's it, I'm out of here. Because you can realize, although they might be happy to pay this average of £167,000, some of them, if they have to pay tax on their worldwide assets and their worldwide income, might find that that figure moves into the many, many millions, and they might just say, it's too much, I can't afford it. So
They're already
for
paying,
sure,
so they're already paying tax on what they earn here,
they
which
do,
is
yes.
167,000, which, like you said, is multiples more than the average person. And you spoke earlier, I'm just going to circle back like Jen Psaki, but you said that there's brain drain in the 70s. I think we're starting to see it here now too. There's a lot of people moving to places like Dubai, and even yeah, there's a lot of countries in the EU. People who there's a lot of Brits who might have access or the right to have an
Who was that
Irish
multimillionaire who
passport.
moved to Singapore? Was it Dyson?
Yeah, yeah,
He was paying millions and millions of pounds
yeah,
of tax, and I mean, he said it was for family reasons or something like that. But he moved to Singapore,
yeah,
where either there's no tax or it's extremely
yeah.
low.
Yeah, so yeah, there is brain drain already going on, and a lot of times people can do the jobs they do here from anywhere else with the way the people work these days. And I remember in the 70s, Jackie Stewart, the Formula One champion, he moved to Switzerland, and loads of other famous celebrities were they left the UK because of that.
And of course, there were plenty of places they could go, including Monaco and other countries. I don't know if they still got non-dom regimes, but there's other countries with similar regimes for new arrivals. So people, if they are taxed to the hilt, some of them will always leave. Of course, many of them will say, I've got family ties, I've got children, I've got school ties, I've got my job, and I can't leave, or I don't want to leave. I'm willing to pay the extra tax. But that won't apply to everybody. So I think my message to non-doms, those who are feeling flexible, we don't know which way the rules are going to change, but at least start to think about planning for your exit if it's on the cards.
Is there anything else we
Well, yeah, perhaps there's a very important tax break that is legislated for in the United Kingdom, which very few people know about, but it's there and available to be grabbed by anybody who's got any wealth. And when I say any wealth, perhaps 100,000 will do it. And that's Section 461 of the Income Tax, Trading and Other Income Act of 2005, which provide, I'm just reading from the screen here,
You
it
wanna
provides,
you wanna share that so people can look at?
well, it's not in a way which is shareable because it's,
Oh, all
yeah,
right.
I can't read, but it provides that income and gains arising from investments held within an offshore insurance policy or offshore insurance bond are not subject to UK tax as they accrue. Instead, the tax is deferred until a chargeable event occurs. Uh, Now, I won't go into too many details on this, but let's just say that it's a device which can be used by anybody in the UK to shield your investments from income tax and capital gains tax on a temporary basis. When I say temporary, that's could be for your entire life and maybe for your children's lives, depending on how you structure things. The advantage of there's many advantages. I don't want to get into a tax lesson or anything like that. I'm not a tax accountant, but the main advantage of this is the deferral aspect. You can still live and you can still withdraw money from these bonds. It's limited to 5% per year cumulatively. So if you draw nothing for 10 years, after 10 years, you can withdraw 50% tax-free. That's 50% of what you started with. But so you can still withdraw to eat whilst paying no UK tax. Now, that's not something that's a tax evasion or tax dodge. It's something which has been put into the UK legislation by the UK government. It's part of the UK legislation and it's part of the insurance legislation that as it exists today. So anybody who's got substantial savings might want to look at that and talk to their accountant or a specialist to see how that would work, or they can simply Google it. You just to find out the how that works. Just Google offshore income bond or something like that, and you'll find the answer as to how it could work.
What section
There's a
is
lot
that
of
again,
nuances.
Clive?
It's section 461 of the Income Tax Trading and Other Income Act 2005.
Do you think Labor, because they said they're gonna fight tax avoidance, because that is tax avoidance, isn't it? Even though
Well,
it's the government who passed that law, they could come
um,
after that.
that would affect far more people. One of the reasons that exists is because countless people in the UK have insurance policies and of all kinds, and so it's legislation which is in there, but it effectively the way to play it is to have a personalised bond where you have your investments and you're growing. But realistically speaking, anybody who's got an insurance policy isn't paying tax on their insurance policy until they get the proceeds. So it would affect an awful lot of people if they should change it. So I don't think it will be changed. And it was something they put into the legislation. They legislated it in as opposed to forgot to put something in to be taxed. So I think that's something people could look at. There's many nuances because those tax benefits, when you die, can be passed on to your children and grandchildren.
Yeah.
You can divide the bond up into segments so that the children can each draw capital or income each year without any tax liability to pay school fees or whatever. There's a lot of things which can be done with it, whilst the initial person who puts the money in might never pay any tax, depending on the rules. Now, if you take out more than 100% of what you put in, at that point, income tax kicks in.
Oh,
But
I see.
it's a great deferral mechanism. So if you took out your maximum of 5% a year, you'd have 20 years effectively tax-free, while what's inside the bond is growing tax-free and not paying.
Yeah.
So of course you've got the benefit of earning on the tax you would otherwise have paid inside the offshore insurance policy, offshore insurance bond.
So it's a good way to leave your wealth to your heirs.
It's a great thing for especially for older people to consider. It's a great thing to consider. It's because it's actually setting things up in a very nice way, which gets passed down for the children, the grandchildren, in a vehicle which will be tax-free for a number of years, because the children will inherit the 5% a year benefits that the parents have not already taken. So if the parents have only taken 50% of the initial amount, there's another 50% which could be taken by the next generation before they start paying tax on what's inside.
Okay, great, Clive. Are you? I guess you have dual citizenship, UK and Swiss. Are
No,
you?
that's correct.
Yeah. Are you going to be voting? Are you in the UK elections?
I'm not entitled to vote because I've lived outside the UK for far too many decades. So no, I won't be allowed to vote. I was, and even if I was allowed to, I don't think I would. I can't see
Yeah.
what difference my
No.
vote would make. And I would probably vote. I'd probably vote for one of the candidates from the non-mainstream parties. I won't say which ones, but frankly, I don't really like any of them particularly. So just a sort of very quick rundown what people should be doing. They should be reviewing their estate planning ahead of the elections. They should be looking at tax efficient investments. Look at what they can do about future capital gains. Take advantage of charitable donations because they are tax deductible at the moment. Move money around inside the family, internal wealth transfer to optimize your allowances. And obviously look at your pension fund to see if there's anything which you could do or should do now while you still can do it before they clamp down on it.
Great. And for those of you who want to find out more and maybe get some help from Clive, you can find him on LinkedIn, Clive Thompson. You can try to connect with him, or he will connect with you. And the other thing I would say, if you're here for the first time, make sure you subscribe if you enjoyed the content, and also hit the like button and share it with your friends and colleagues and family, because unfortunately, ever since, well, it's been ever since time immemorial, when governments are hard up for funds and they're up to here and that, they're gonna come after your earnings and also your wealth.
And Mary, may I just mention that none of what I said is tax advice. I'm not a qualified
Yeah,
tax advisor. I'm just telling you what I see other
yeah,
people doing. And I think other people should ask their accountants or tax advisor.
I agree with that too. I'm not a tax advisor. I'm not an investment advisor either. We're just giving you our opinion. And yeah, consult with an accountant or a solicitor. And yeah, have a great weekend. And you too, Clive. Have a great weekend. And I hope the weather improves in Switzerland.
Thank you, Mario. Great weekend.